All right, and today we are going to be talking about optimizing the return on investment of scaling cPanel and WHM. So cPanel and WHM was originally designed to be a single server solution. But look at all these top hosting companies in the United States that are utilizing cPanel. Some of them are even using it as their primary hosting infrastructure. Look at HostGator, also known as WebsiteWelcome.com. They use cPanel as their primary infrastructure. So does Bluehost, also known as HostMonster. And 3 of the other top hosting companies in the United States also offer cPanel. And you'll notice here, none of the top hosting companies in the US use any of our competitors. So of the commercially available control panels that our hosting providers out there can use, only cPanel is utilized as primary infrastructure for large-scale deployments. So cPanel is much more than just for single servers. So how massive are these deployments? HostGator claims to host over 2.5 million domains, and they only use cPanel and WHM. Matt Heaton over at Bluehost hosts over 1.9 million domains on cPanel and WHM. So again, more than a single server, we have cPanel and WHM scaling to millions of domains. So why are we here today? So this presentation is going to be an abstract discussion about how to massively scale cPanel and WHM. So we're going to go well beyond the native capability of cPanel and WHM, well beyond the supported capabilities of cPanel and WHM, into the realm of what is possible with cPanel and WHM. So we're going far beyond the cluster or remote access section of WHM. So many of these suggestions are going to be things that you would implement at your own risk. But what gives me the authority to talk about this topic? Well, I'm Dave. I am the technical product specialist here at cPanel. I've been answering questions since 2006 about what cPanel does and what cPanel is capable of. As a result, I get a front row seat to industry trends, what hosting companies are doing for their deployments, as well as tactics they are using for scaling their cPanel and WHM solutions. So today's presentation is about large-scale cPanel and WHM deployment. So let's talk about the basic components first. When you have a larger deployment, you need to do more planning. If you have a sports car versus a tractor-trailer with a 40-ton load, this is the difference between a small deployment and a large-scale deployment. A sports car, you can drive across any bridge, you can go down a dirt road, you can go onto any bridge, you don't have to worry. You're a small car, you can go anywhere. Now, when you're a tractor-trailer with a 40-ton load that's taller than some bridges, you have to be more careful. Every turn must be planned. Every underpass must be accounted for. Make sure that things are going to work well. Otherwise, you might wind up with big problems. So anything that deals with large-scale deployments means that you have to do lots of planning. So let's talk about some planning things that you might want to consider. How are you effectively allocating IPs? You, as a data center, get a block of IPs. You want to make sure that your customers that need SSL certificates can get a dedicated IP. You don't want to wind up in a situation where you have run out of IPs because you have allocated IPs to resellers that really don't have a use for a dedicated IP. What about DNS clustering? DNS clustering is a native feature of cPanel and WHM, and it's a very forward-looking thing to implement because once you scale to multiple servers and scale to hundreds of servers, being able to move your customer among cPanel servers quickly and easily without having them to go back to their registrar to change anything is a huge benefit to you as it helps maximize the customer's experience. So with DNS clustering, you can move a customer from one server to another, and they never have to go back to their registrar to update anything. Also, disaster planning. What happens if a hard drive fails? What happens if a server is stolen? What do you do in these scenarios? And not just from a technical perspective, but what about the facility monitoring? You might be so focused on running tools like Nagios and Cacti to make sure your service is up and running, but what about the air conditioning system? How do you make sure all your facilities are up and running? That is something else you need to consider with large-scale deployments. So we're dealing with the servers, but let's think about the customers as well. You're going to be taking in lots of money. You're going to have lots of customers that might forget to pay their bill or whatever billing situation may arise. So do you have billing automation? Sure, there's off-the-shelf possibilities that are available to help you massively scale your billing automation. Ubersmith is a fine example of that. That is their claim to fame, being the billing solution for data centers. But I notice a lot of data centers also use custom-built solutions. So this is where our APIs come into play. You can build whatever you want, and then use our APIs to tie our systems in with your systems. And we're not just talking about the product APIs, where you can automate service restarts or provisioning of accounts. We're talking about license automation as well. So when you create a new cPanel server and you provision that server, you also provision a license for that server automatically. This way, it's less work that you need to do and your technicians need to do, so you can use your resources on other tasks. Customer assistance. Sooner or later, your customers are going to need help. Email and tickets remain the industry standard for corresponding with customers, but many providers also offer phone support, live chat, and an interesting trend we're seeing is knowledge-based articles and frequently asked questions that are directly based off the tickets they have received from their customers. So some software can actually take a ticket and make that into a knowledge-based article, so somebody else trying to submit a ticket about the same thing first encounters, hey, do you mean the same problem that this person had that was resolved in this way? This way, it's less resources that you need to expend to resolve a customer's problem. Now, there's some off-the-shelf software that is designed for large-scale customer assistance. Kayako is pretty much a dominant solution at the moment, but I've also seen many custom solutions. Again, when we're talking large-scale planning, you're going to notice that a lot of companies use custom solutions, but then again, it also means that they can do custom things that are not accommodated by off-the-shelf software, especially when it comes to billing, if you want to do some unique methods of billing or do things that set your business apart from every other business that's out there. This is where you're going to see a lot of innovation in the industry. But let's get back to the servers. We talked about the software, the services, but what about the hardware? You want to have quality hardware that's just a sufficient quality. You don't need to buy the monster cables version of a hard drive. You don't need to go out and basically spend that much money. You basically want to buy hardware that's not about to fail. Don't be going to the Goodwill store to buy hard drives for your servers. Another thing with servers, provisioning automation. It's great that you have your custom settings, your perfect branding, the ideal mix of modules for Apache, but having to do that manually for every server you provision is not practical in a large-scale environment. You need to do automation. So again, plan ahead. As with anything else with scale, you do need to plan ahead. So let's get back to provisioning automation. A common tactic I've seen for massively provisioning cPanel is the creation of a template server. So that your template server has every setting set to precisely what you want it to be. It has all the branding that you want, all the Apache modules that you want, all the hosting packages that you want. Everything is ready to go as if you're going to deploy the server right now. But you're not going to put any customers on this server. Instead, it's just a template server. And what you do is either you use custom scripts and copy files from your template server onto your new cPanel and WHM server. So this would be like if you're doing a dedicated server to another dedicated server, because with a cPanel and WHM, most of your settings are stored in files. So all you need to do is move the files over to the other server, and unless there's any comments at the top of the file that say, hey, you need to run this command afterwards, you can just copy the file and it's applied. Another tactic is using virtual environment tools. Many virtual environment tools support what's known as templating, where you have a virtual server that's your template server, and you clone the server to as needed whenever you want to provision a new server. But whichever method you use for provisioning a server, always be sure to run scripts UP-CP after provisioning the server. This will upgrade the cPanel and WHM software to the latest version, as well as your operating system software and other software running on the server. And this is all done in the background. So your customer, your new customer, can be using that cPanel and WHM server to its full potential without being concerned about there being an update running in the background. They could just use the full capabilities of that software. So that deals with provisioning, but let's talk about maximizing hardware effectiveness. So it's great that you have the ability to provision a lot of identical servers. You can even have what's known as a homogeneous deployment, where you have all servers identical and they all have the same settings, the same modules, the same software. This is a homogeneous deployment. However, you can also opt for a heterogeneous deployment. And this is often where you have many similar servers, but you have a few servers that are slightly different. So this allows you to maximize the effectiveness of your varied hardware resources. So let's go through, wait a second, how can heterogeneous deployments maximize my hardware effectiveness in contrast with homogeneous deployment? Let's start with Tomcat. A lot of people want to offer JSP pages as a reseller, so they're like, hey, I want Tomcat. Well, putting Tomcat on every single server in your fleet is not a great idea. Not many people are using JSP in a shared hosting space. So why do you want to have this resource hog consuming all of these resources on all of your servers? Instead, have your servers not running Tomcat, and then have a server or a few servers running Tomcat. This way, okay, it's a resource hog, but it's only a resource hog on a limited number of servers. So you can place your customers that need Tomcat on those specific servers that are running Tomcat. As a result, you might even want to upcharge your customers. This might be an upsell option for you. They can pay more for Tomcat so that you can move their account onto the Tomcat server. What about PHP 5.2? You can't run PHP 5.2 and 5.3 on the same server. And some people are locked into PHP 5.2. Usually those people that have encoded scripts, they're locked into that specific version of PHP, and they cannot use PHP 5.3. So what you can do, you can have a server that's still running PHP 5.2 until the time comes where those customers can use 5.3. In the meantime, the rest of your server fleet can run the latest and most up-to-date version of PHP without issue. And the same goes for PHP 4 if you still have customers running PHP 4. Mono is another example. Not every customer wants Mono. Not every customer wants .NET capabilities on Linux. So you can have a server or a couple of servers that have Mono installed on them, and your customers that specifically need those capabilities can be on those servers rather than your main server fleet. But the main thing I see, in addition to Tomcat in terms of resources, is MySQL performance. So if you got a server that is hosting forums, and those are really popular forums, the main bottleneck is probably not going to be disk I/O per se, but really MySQL in particular. So you might want to have a database server, a hardware machine that is specifically designed for hosting databases, and have that host MySQL, and then say, hey, well, you seem to be needing a lot of MySQL performance. How about I sell you access to this MySQL server that is designed to give you the best performance for MySQL? And then you can use our remote server capability in WHM to tie that cPanel server into WHM, and again, many upselling opportunities here. Great system administration is basically knowing what's running on your server and what doesn't need to be running. So if your customers are not using specific functionality, consider disabling it so you can conserve resources. So how do you know what your customers are using? Well, cPanel generates Apache-style access logs in user local cPanel logs access log. What this means is you can take that access log file, put it into any statistics program that can process Apache logs, and then it generates for you a report of all the features your cPanel customers are using. But what about uptime? 4 nines uptime just isn't enough anymore. You really need to maximize the uptime. That's the feeling in the industry right now. So how can we get to more than 4 nines? Good hardware. That's always a good start. The main thing that's going to be a catastrophic failure on your server is if your hardware fails. You can restart Apache, you can't restart a hard drive. So keep that in mind, have decent quality hardware. Some people like to do high availability solutions with cPanel and WHM. And what this involves is multiple cPanel and WHM servers behind a load balancing appliance, but they somehow have the same data on them. Now, this can be done by manually synchronizing data very frequently. This is a solution I see falling out of favor in favor of centralized storage. But synchronizing data and centralized storage, neither one of those are natively supported by cPanel. But many of our customers do implement those solutions. So with centralized storage, you would have your cPanel and WHM servers pulling from the same, whether it's a centralized share, a NAS, a SAN, whatever the case may be, you're pulling from the same hard drive for both servers. And in that scenario, you can go ahead and use a protocol like iSCSI to ensure that file locking and quotas are properly enforced. Some of our customers like to use NFS. Unfortunately, NFS does have file locking deficiencies and lacks quota support, so it does not work well in a shared hosting environment. Another solution that we're now seeing is virtualization. You've always thought of virtualization as, wait a second, that's just something I just do to make one server into multiple servers. Yes, that's one way to use virtualization. Another way is to have it make real-time backups of your VPS. So basically, it's like real-time imaging. There's a lot of really cool capabilities that are being added to virtualization software now, especially in the past 12 months. So let's talk more about virtualization. We're familiar with the traditional imaging of servers, but you can also do server mirroring with some virtualization tools, where as soon as data is written to one virtual machine, it gets written to another virtual machine. Some virtualization environments support that. There are even VPSs now that can span multiple physical servers. You know, the traditional view is a VPS is smaller than a dedicated server, but that's being flipped on its head, where a VPS can now be bigger than a dedicated server. And another thing to keep in mind is cloud solutions that work with cPanel and WHM deployments. We have many exhibitors at the cPanel conference that are demonstrating cloud solutions designed to work with cPanel and WHM. So this is all great about virtualization technologies, but what if I find a virtualization technology? How would I know it works with cPanel and WHM? Well, here's a quick checklist. This is not a guarantee, but I will say if you make it through this checklist, there's a good 95% chance off the top of my head that it will likely work with cPanel. So let's start from the top. Your server needs to have one publicly visible static IP address. This is basically the requirement for licensing cPanel. You need to have one publicly visible static IP address. The virtualization environment cannot require an NAT. I know there are some virtualization environments out there, such as Amazon's cloud. They require you to use NAT. At this time, cPanel and WHM is not designed to accommodate NAT, network address translation. So if you do that, you're going to be pushing the limits of the software. You're going to have to do some customization to the software to ensure it works within that environment. Another item that we see for virtual environments is that localhost must resolve to 127.0.0.1. You might think that localhost always resolves to 127.0.0.1, but there are environments. A classic example is the FreeBSD jail, where localhost does not resolve to that address. Another item to keep in mind is that it must use a file system that cPanel and WHM itself supports. If you use any of the ext file systems, ext2, ext3, even ext4, you'll be all right. But if you're worrying about using something like CFS, I would say do some testing first, because we might not explicitly test against that file system. And speaking of file systems, I cannot enforce this point enough. The file system must support file locking, and it must support quota enforcement. Spectacularly bad things can happen on a shared hosting server if there's no file locking. So file locking is incredibly important in a shared hosting environment. So let's maximize the return on investment. We're talking about scaling. Let's talk about the actual return on investment now. So get more prospects. The way you do this, make your offer stand out. Offer quality service, offer value-added services, upsell your customers, give them what they need, but don't be afraid to charge extra for those services. The main thing I want to really emphasize here is acquire, not replenish customers. Some companies get into the habit of, well, we need to get more customers, we need to get more customers, we need to get more customers, and they don't realize they're losing customers as fast as they're gaining them. So all these marketing and sales efforts are just to maintain your number of customers that you have right now. Your goal should be not just to replenish your customers, but constantly add to your customer base. So this is done by offering quality service, get the word of mouth going, offer value-added service, give your customers what they want. But at the same time, avoid the race to the bottom. You're not going to be the next Walmart of web hosting. So don't be the guy trying to offer 50-cent hosting with all these features. Now, you can offer 50-cent hosting that's just static HTML pages and upsell them from there. That's great. That's an interesting business method, and I've seen companies be very successful with that. Some companies even offer free hosting and upsell customers from that as well. But your goal should be to make these customers be a source of income, not just a number for you to take pride in that, oh, I have 10,000 accounts. Well, how much money are you making? Well, I'm making 10 bucks a month. Yeah, you gotta be very practical when it comes to your business sense here. Maximizing sales. I've noticed that our partners that know our product best are best able to sell more cPanel and WHM, more of their offerings. So whether they're shared hosting providers or dedicated server providers, the more they know the software, the better they're able to connect the needs of their clients with the capabilities of our software. So a client comes to you and is like, hey, I need software that lets me create FTP accounts, and I want to drag and drop items onto my hosting account. I don't like FTP, I can never figure it out. Well, cPanel offers that. If you didn't know that, you would not be able to connect the needs of your customer, your prospect, with your offerings. So I emphasize, know the product well. The more knowledge you have about cPanel and WHM, the more cPanel and WHM sales you will have. If you're a cPanel partner NOC, you have access to cPanel sales assistants. Just email sales@cpanel.net, and we'll work with you to close your cPanel sale. That's what we're here for. We're here to help our partners. So if you're a cPanel partner NOC, we also offer on-site sales training and on-site technical training. But our training is not just limited to cPanel partner NOCs. If you just want to come for web-based sales training, come to our webinars at cpanel.net/webinars, and you can see our upcoming sales webinars, as well as listen to our past webinars about various cPanel products. And if you have any questions in detail, just email me at sales@cpanel.net. If you want to become a cPanel partner, just go to resell.cpanel.net to see all the benefits of becoming a cPanel partner and to begin the application process. It's only a $300 a month licensing commitment to become a cPanel partner NOC. So if you make more than $300 a month, cPanel partnership is right up your alley. But again, don't just become a cPanel partner. Establish an effective partnership with cPanel. We're here to help. Our partnerships go well beyond mere price reductions. Let us know what you need. And remember, our technical analysts are always here 24/7, including holidays, to assist with technical issues. So let's review what we've learned today. cPanel isn't just for single servers. The largest web hosting providers have massively scaled cPanel and WHM deployments, and planning is the key to those large deployments.